Greetings to all true boxing fans. Last night, I watched the fight between Galal Yafai and Francisco Rodriguez live. 100. Oh, he just takes the shot and lands it right on his head. The fight was really awesome. The point is, the Mexican fighter with 6 losses, Rodriguez, came to Britain to face the local star, the 2021 Olympic champion, Galal Yafai. Galal Yafai is that fighter who has all wins, a knockout artist, and a southpaw. Really tough. Well, at least, that's what everyone thought before this fight. Obviously, the local judges, the local referee, basically, everything was set up in favor of Galal Yafai. But the visiting Mexican, let me remind you again, with 6 career losses, just beat up Galal Yafai. No, he didn't knock him out, although he did knock him down once at the end of the fight. But basically, he just kept hitting him over and over. At first, the fight was relatively competitive. The first 4 rounds, as a professional, he got from Gio. But we all know about the legendary British judging, and besides, no one really knew who the judges were favoring during the fight. But that small initial advantage kept growing and growing. And by the later rounds, it was clear that Yafai was completely losing. Yeah, that's how things are now. Give the channel a lifeline and... So, basically, yes, he lost. Now, at first, I didn't want to record an analysis of this fight, let alone upload it to YouTube. Actually, no, I did analyze everything and shared my thoughts only in a private channel. I run a private, paid Telegram channel. Well, many, actually, not many, about 300 people are subscribed to it. A monthly subscription there costs about as much as a cup of coffee. And why didn't I want to post the analysis on YouTube? No, it's not out of greed or anything like that. Like I just don't want to share the analysis with you. No, it's something completely different. The thing is, the 50 kilogram, 800 gram weight class, the flyweight, the weight of a fly. Let's just be honest about it. Basically, it's not interesting to a wide audience. So really, only true enthusiasts might follow it. But then I started thinking, this fight isn't just a match between 2 athletes. It's a fight between 2. Well, each athlete represents a certain side. It's a fight of an Olympian, a representative of that classic, modern Olympic boxing style. And it's a fight of a pro. Well, meaning Rodriguez. So, in the ring, it was Olympic boxing versus pro boxing going head-to-head. And, basically, we saw how that turned out. Yeah, and that's what makes it really interesting. So, the thing is, what was clear before the fight, right? That Yafai is a Brit of Yemeni descent. Well, actually, how should I put it? He was born in Britain, but his parents, his ancestors, they emigrated from Yemen to the UK. He's a good boxer by today's standards. He's a southpaw, he's pretty sensitive, strange as that may sound, even though it didn't help him in the fight. Meaning, he has a good sense of distance. Being a southpaw with other opponents, he moves well on his feet, circling around their lead hand and lead foot. In other fights, strange as it may sound, he actually works with his lead hand, uses his jab. His jab isn't piercing. He can't really keep his opponent at bay with it, but it works more like a rangefinder. So basically, he's measuring the distance. And then, usually, Yafai throws hooks and straight punches. Unfortunately, with his rear hand, he doesn't really have any power in that punch, technically speaking. That's actually a problem in modern Olympic boxing right now. Very few people know how to really put their weight into straight punches to make them powerful. That's why he throws hooks, and he's really good at them. So, he's an aggressive fighter. He overwhelmed Sonny Edwards in his last fight. So, Yafai can really deal a lot of damage. Geddes, that was a really good attack from your guy. But before the fight, what was the main question? That he can deal a lot of damage, but how well can he take a punch? That's what people were wondering about. So Francisco Rodriguez won, and maybe now is the time to sing his praises, to heap accolades on him. But honestly, he's just an ordinary, typical Mexican boxer. Just your classic professional Mexican fighter. He can really take a punch. That's probably the most important thing. He doesn't get rattled when he takes a hit. He keeps moving forward. He fights at all ranges. Still, Rodriguez is probably at his best when he's fighting up close, at close or mid-range, closer in. And this is his 83rd round, and he really pours it on, keeps throwing punches, and he's already adapted to this kind of pace and these exchanges. In other words, this is their style of boxing, this is their. Basically, he feels like a fish in water in this kind of fight because he's Mexican. They've been selected for this kind of boxing since childhood, yeah? So close-range fighting is really popular there, with a lot of hooks and side punches. You inevitably take some hits, and anyone who can handle it gets weeded out from a young age. Only the toughest stick around. And now, what did we see? Well, basically, we saw a verdict for Yafai and for modern Olympic boxing as it is. No, actually, Olympic boxing is awesome. Olympians, they're champions. But it's just that before, in the 90s or even earlier, in the 80s or 70s, if an Olympic champion went pro, almost always he would become a champion in the pros and dominate there. In other words, he was truly a badass. Moreover, the legendary heavyweight champions of the past, well, except for Mike Tyson, which makes sense, were usually Olympic champions who then went pro and crushed everyone there too. But now, that's just not the case at all. Why is that? There used to be this thing where Olympic boxers were usually very sensitive fighters, and they were great at keeping their distance. In other words, they were good at scoring points, landing clean shots, and not taking many hits themselves. So, these are sensitive boxers. And if an Olympic boxer like that has a good straight punch, for example, even with his lead hand, a powerful straight punch, then with that he can. Of course, there are pros and cons to this. You're not going to be bouncing around on your toes for all 12 rounds. Even Usyk, for example, stops at certain moments. But you can control your opponent with your straight punches. But if you, as an Olympian, are more of a brawler yourself, like, for example, if you're like Yafai, who focuses on hooks, then that's cool. You can land good shots on your opponent with those punches, but you can't use them to keep him away from you, to make sure he stays at a distance. So what happens is, Yafai kind of beat up the Mexican guy. And yes, he landed hard shots. But beyond that, you can't really do much. I mean, if you're boxing with straight punches, like Bivol, or, I don't know, Kovalev, Carl Frampton, among the Brits, Guillermo Rigondeaux, or Vasily Lomachenko, then with those same punches, you're basically defending yourself too. In other words, you control your opponent so much, if he comes at you, you hit him with straight punches, send him this way, that way, and break him down. So, in a way, you're protected by that. You might even be open, like Roy Jones. But even though you're open, they still can't really reach you, because you're either moving away or sticking your jabs in. And basically, when you don't have that, it just turns into a brawl. And in that brawl, F might even hit harder, but it still didn't help him. Because the Mexican guy gets less rattled by taking punches. F's chin, in general, was pretty solid, actually, on par with the rest. But still, he gets flustered, he takes shots, and in the moment, he loses his composure and clams up. The Mexican guy doesn't worry about it at all. That's the first point. So then, what matters more here? Punching power or the number of punches? In other words, the Mexican had the edge in punch volume, and again, he was steady. So Yafai stands more upright, a bit more on his back foot, the rear one. Basically, he's adapted his boxing style to throw strong hooks more from a distance, like a mid to long range. But the Mexican comes in closer. He pushes him back, and that's when Yafai starts to lose his composure. Up close, Yafai loses his heavy punch, but the Mexican still keeps his power. So basically, Francisco Rodriguez beat him. From my point of view, this fight is interesting not just as a match between Yafai and Rodriguez. Well, although that too, yes. But more as a clash between modern professional boxing, which has stayed pretty much the same as it used to be, and basically, modern Olympic boxing. So, it turns out that Olympians, well, most of them, even the good, skilled ones, a lot of them just don't have power, in their right straight if they're right-handed, or in their left straight if they're left-handed. They usually have a jab, yeah, but the jab isn't enough. And they can't control their opponent from a distance, can't break them down or keep them at bay from afar. So basically, they don't have that option anymore. So then, what's the advantage of their sensitivity? Is it just that they're Olympians, right? So basically, you can just go forward against them, and then it turns into a brawl, and at that point, it comes down to who has the tougher chin, and who hits harder. Alright, let's say, for example, Yafai hits harder. But again, when it comes to those close-range exchanges, there's technique involved there too. And let's just say, a Mexican pro's technique is in no way worse than that of an Olympic boxer. Those are just some of my thoughts. Thank you for watching this video. Also, who's fighting next weekend? First, Dorticos versus Ramirez. Dorticos, I think, in the bedroom, most likely. He's potentially very dangerous, but that's just in theory. In practice, he's probably not much of a threat. We'll have to see how it goes. Also, Chavez is fighting the most famous modern boxer and blogger, Jake Paul. And Christian Bilaj will also be facing a pretty solid Polish fighter, Maciej Sulecki. By the way, it's absolutely clear how the fight will play out. It's obvious even before the match. And as always, I post my predictions for all these fights in my private Telegram channel. Those are my thoughts. Subscribe, everyone. Wishing you all the best. See you next time. Did you turn off the camera?